Support for WPR comes from the Dram Corporation in Manitowoc, committed to sustainably producing fertilizers for organic gardening and farming. Made in Algoma, Wisconsin. More is at dramm.com.
Welcome to another edition of Garden Talk. Larry Mealer here. Really great to have you along on WPR News. We're talking today about how to keep your plants from succumbing, shall we say, to the summer extremes. And we have some of that going on right now in our state. And back with us, Lis Friemoth. She provides concierge horticultural services through her business. It's called The Garden Hoe. And always great to have her come by. And certainly if you have gardening questions, I hope you will join in. You can reach us by phone at 800-642-1234, 1-800-642-1234, or send an email to talk@wpr.org. That's talk@wpr.org. Lis Friemoth, good to have you back.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure. Your listeners are fantastic.
I agree with you 100%. And it's we've got some warm weather coming. Lots of reasons I think that plants can struggle this time of the year. One of them certainly is the heat.
The heat, definitely. And, we're looking at a few years, at least in the southern part of the state, of drought. Yeah, we have built up drought over time here. And, this last rain that we got was so sporadic as well. A friend of mine that lives 20 minutes away had 6 inches of rain, and we had 2.5. And so, that inconsistency often adds to those problems that we will see or that will develop. And really what we're looking at right now, and especially with 90-degree days coming up, and I think the heat index for a lot of Wisconsin and the Midwest was going to be up over 100 in parts. So that's traumatic, as traumatic for plants as it is for us. So a couple of things that we really, want to focus on is don't love too much. Because we as humans can make our plants disappear as quick as anything by loving them too much. And what I mean by that is, when we're looking at 90-degree days, make sure you're outside to water those annuals or those newly planted perennials or anything else early in the morning. Hit it before the heat. Plants normally use a lot of water about 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, as they're just starting to, quote unquote, come awake for the day. And so you want to give them plenty of moisture to get that in their system so that as it's disappearing throughout the day, whether that's through transpiration or, the plant using it in another way, you want to make sure that there's plenty of moisture there, but not too much, because you can do more trouble, more problem for that plant by overwatering than just giving it the right amount or a little bit less. And again, we cannot say this enough. Water deeply and don't water frequently. So as often as the plants need it, but make sure you're watering slowly and deeply, not a fast spray over the top. When we're looking at temperatures and conditions like this, you really want to focus on keeping that upper tissue healthy. And by putting moisture on it, you can sometimes make those flower petals disintegrate a little bit faster. You'll lose some of that. There'll be a little bit of burn often depending on what's in your water. So hit the root zone. Really hit the root zone. Now, proviso to that is if you've got evergreens that are newly planted, they actually can take moisture in through their needles. So if that would be a situation where as long as there's plenty of airflow and you're not having that moisture sit on those needles at temperature of like 65 to 78, 80, then you're going to avoid some of the leaf pathogens that otherwise you might invite in. So again, give them a spritz in the morning if they're looking like they need it. Blue spruce definitely don't do that with. I'm talking about like arborvitas and some of the spruces, some of the other spruces that are a little bit better for our area than a blue spruce. But that's kind of overall for the next few days. Now, for the rest of summer, what are we going to do? Yeah, more of the same. It's just
more of the same.
it's just monitor how your plants are reacting, and if they're starting to wilt and you know that they have water, that they've got plenty of water, don't put more water on. It's often a sign of a root rot issue as opposed to a drought issue. So you do want to be a little bit careful with that. If you're going to move stuff, don't. Just wait. Just wait. Do some planning right now and then move things when we get some cooler temperatures.
Dennis in Stoughton has a question relating to soil, so let's go there. Dennis, hi.
Hi, thank you. I've been gardening the same raised bed for over 15 years and had good luck, no problems. I had a soil test done this year, and the pH came back at 7.8.
Ooh.
And the recommendation was to not do anything about it. So I'm growing tomatoes and green beans in that garden. Is that good advice?
Did you have that done at a reputable soil lab?
Yeah, the UW soil.
And when you submitted that sample, did you tell them what you were going to plant in that area?
No, I did not.
Okay, that's the huge difference. So what you might want to do is follow that soil sample up with either an email or a phone call to them, because I don't know what your soil test results were. It's not just the pH, but also the fertility level and things like that they would be looking at. When you submit a soil sample, I always recommend that you put on that sample what you're going to plant. And the reason is they can be really, really specific. They're awesome. They can be really, really specific about what you need to put on that site in order to get optimal benefit for your plants. So just follow that up and tell them what you want to plant in there, and maybe they'll have a little bit of a change to their recommendation. And if not, then you did your due diligence and you should be fine.
Yeah, I think that's very good advice. Dennis, thank you so much for calling. Appreciate your call. And that's a good reminder for everybody.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, send that soil test in, say, here's what I'm planting or plan to plant.
And, all of us get in a hurry when we're doing things like that.
Yeah.
And it might be, so it's not that they've never run into this before, that somebody's going to call and say, oh, hey, wait, I forgot to put this on. So, yeah. But please do that. I forget to do that sometimes myself. Not smart.
Lis Friemoth, our guest, and you can join in too with your questions. The number to call, 800-642-1234, or you could email us to talk@wpr.org. We would love to hear from you. The native plants in our garden, are they less likely to be bothered by the extremes in summer?
I'm going to give you my standard answer for everything. Depends. It really does depend. Natives have a much better chance when they are properly sited and properly installed and properly established. They have a much better chance of survival than some of our others. But that doesn't mean other plants won't work. But embrace the natives. I mean, there's so much color and habit breeding work being done on the natives, which as we know, are called nativars. And we have some purists that say that those aren't really natives. Well, whatever. Potato. I say yes, they are. And we have got great native breeders and growers in this state, so definitely. And, when you're looking at some of the natives, especially the prairie plants, those roots go down miles.
Yeah.
That's exaggerating, but
long way.
They are very, very deep. And how that does benefit us as plant growers, plant parents, is, excuse me, that it will reach for the moisture deep down in the soil. There is less chance of a lack of water deep than there is up high. So that's why you want those roots. When we talk about watering deeply, what you're looking at doing is getting moisture into that soil structure down deep. And if you only water shallow, what you're doing is you're wetting the top 2 inches. And depending on the plant's time of development, that will often train those roots early on when you plant that. It'll train those roots to develop shallow. as opposed to reaching for that moisture. Think about it when you go to the garden center, buy a pot. You notice that the pots are getting taller and thinner
Yeah.
in a lot of situations, and that's to encourage those roots to go a little bit deeper, which is going to give them a better chance of survival once you get them out in their planted situation.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. That's why.
Amazing, isn't it? Those plants outthink us if we just do it right.
Oh, boy. Well, we've got a question here about sun versus shade. Are there some, what plants do really well in hot weather and sunny weather?
Oh, boy. Depends on where you are, what your soil is. We have a lot of plants that do really quite well in sandy, sharply drained soil, things that you wouldn't really consider. Carnations will actually do quite well. Coneflower will do very well in kind of a sharply drained situation. So once those roots are developed and established, then you can kind of leave them on their own and they'll handle whatever nature throws at them because they're going to develop those deep roots. But if you are, excuse me, I forgot where I was going with that, Larry. I had a moment. I had a senior moment, so let's just go with it. Let's just run on to the sunshade. So when you're looking at which plants go for sun and which ones go for shade, the determination that I got from Alan Armitage just a couple of months ago, which I love, is that if you have afternoon sun, and we're talking sun, not dappled light under a tree, but if you have afternoon sun, consider putting a sun plant in. Even if it gets full, heavy morning shade, that afternoon sun is what determines that plant's behavior for the rest of the day and then into the night and the following morning. So you want to accommodate that. If it's sunny in the morning but shady in the afternoon, then that's a shade plant. A shade plant would be more appropriate for that. And why is that? Because, we've all had these discussions throughout the years of what's the density of the shade? How's the moisture level? Well, let's get down to brass tacks. And that is, it's hot in the afternoon, it's cooler in the morning, and the plants will, we want them to live, so we want to accommodate what they need. If they need a lot of heat, that's sun. If it's afternoon, it's sun. There you go.
There you go. Jill in Minocqua has something for us. Let's go there. Jill, hi.
Hi, Larry. So my big question is, I have hemlock trees that I've grown in the last 15 years. They were about 6 inches tall when I got them from a neighbor. And this last winter, from about my neck, my height down, like every other needle is gone. Did something happen in the winter? We didn't have a lot of snow again. Did I have an animal come in and nibble on them?
Very possible an animal, but let me ask you what these needles look like. You said that quite a few of them are gone. Are they half gone, fully gone? Were there needles on the ground?
I'm not home. I don't know if there were needles. Oh. I don't think there were needles.
Okay, well, these are.
I have melt under it, but I would say that no. Then if the needle is gone, it's gone.
Okay, so you're not seeing any residue under the tree, like it had needle fall or something like that.
I don't think so.
Okay, couple things to look for when you're looking at hemlocks. There are scale insects that will hit hemlocks, and you have to get up there close and personal with a magnifying glass sometimes to see them. So first thing I would do is go and take a look at that. And you can get wonderful magnifiers, jeweler's loupe kind of thing. That's really all you're looking for. You don't need to have a lab quality microscope to see these things. So you're talking about a 10 or 40 times magnifying glass. That's all you really need. And you would be able to see that there is something. It'll be a bump with a hard shell. And that can actually take needles out. Excuse me. They can actually fall out after the scale hatches and kind of crawls around. They're going to feed, and you will see a loss of needles. But oftentimes with that, we'll see needles under because they're not chewing the entire needle. It's just decimating it enough that it falls off. The other thing is that I have been seeing over the last 5 years has been deer damage on hemlock. It has historically been labeled as a deer-resistant evergreen, and I'm not finding that to be the case 100%. We are seeing some really intense deer feeding on hemlocks. So what you might want to look for underneath that tree is to see if you've got deer poo-poo. If deer poo-poo is there, then they probably are even in the vicinity, and you should be able to see their hoof tracks in there also. Then they potentially would be feeding on it. And I will tell you that preventing deer from getting to trees is, arm yourself, get your wire out there, get your fence posts, things like that. But figure out what it is by going and taking a look, and then we can see what to do about it at that point. If you're seeing scale, there are treatments. Deer, you can prevent them from getting to it as best as you can.
Jill, thank you very much for calling. Appreciate your call. Lis Friemoth, our guest today. I'm Larry Mealer. You're listening to Garden Talk on WPR News. You're listening to Garden Talk. Larry Mealer here. Stay with us through the show today. The last half hour of the show, we'll be talking about the art of Japanese gardens and Japanese gardening with our guest who has a great new book out on it. So looking forward to that. But right now we're visiting with your garden and Lis Friemoth, our guest. And Scott in Elko will give you a chance to join in.
Good morning. I just heard you mention coneflowers, and I have been trying to get coneflowers to grow. They're around the house in the decorative garden, but I've been trying to get them to grow out in a field because the bees, butterflies, and every bird seems to like those.
Mm-hmm.
I have spread them in the fall on scraped up dirt. I have spread them in the spring in scraped up dirt. I've just thrown them on the ground in the spring and fall, and I have never had any luck.
What kind of soil do you have?
Pretty much more sand than dirt, up on a high hill, so it's a glacial deposit of mostly sand, but there is dirt in here, but not much.
Okay, what you might want to do, and if you're dealing with a large area, I can understand why you want to seed it as opposed to put plants in, but you may not have enough soil structure to get the moisture around that seed enough to get it to sprout. And if you're seeing that across the board where you're not getting any sprouting, I'm going to go with, if you're confident with your seed, I'm going to go with that the soil is not right for doing that type of seeding. So you may want to start those seeds and then transplant plants out, small plants. How many acres are we talking about here?
Both of my food plots or my cleared areas are maybe a quarter of an acre of both.
Yeah, that's a lot. Otherwise, you know what? Who I would call Prairie Nursery, because this is more of a nursery situation than it is an ornamental garden situation. And prairies, I defer to the experts because that is a whole different ball of wax than normally what I deal with. I can burn them. I've been doing that for years. But as far as planting, I always defer to the experts on that.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's kind of not a good answer, but that is what I would do.
All right, Scott, there you go. Prairie Nursery is
And there's a lot
of other ones.
There's
too.
a lot of really great prairie enthusiasts out there with companies that would love to help you with that problem.
Scott, thank you very much for calling. Again, you can join us. We got open lines. Get you on pretty quickly. The number is 800-642-1234. Or you could email to talk@wpr.org. Here's an email from Tom. What do you recommend to combat apple maggots and railroad worms in apples?
Well, an email is a difficult way to approach this because I don't know what his care plan is. Number one is first to develop a care plan for your fruit trees. And if you're seeing any kind of insect activity, and to an extent where you are having a huge problem and you're not spraying, it may be your only recourse is to spray, and to develop a spray program. And with fruit trees, you have to do that before spring comes. So before the buds even plump up, you need to be out there and you need to be figuring out what you need to do, because if you don't have a healthy tree or a care plan, the insects are going to go crazy when they feel like it, and we never know when that might be. We can't predict that. So, are there organic alternatives? Yes, there are to chemical treatments. There's not a whole lot that is going to kill things. One of the best ways to do organic fruit control kind of care is with a kaolin clay product. And that's, you are allowed under, I think, certified organic practices to use some chemicals for some control. If you're certified organic, you check the regulations and make sure that you're doing something appropriate. But otherwise, kaolin clay acts as a rebuffer. And that means that it's not going to have any remedial effect. It's not going to have any preventative effect other than the disease in the insect can't penetrate the clay very well, and so they go on to an easier target. And that's one of the best ways to actually keep things off of it. But you have to keep that kaolin clay on the plant all year long. It does not inhibit photosynthesis. It doesn't inhibit fruit development. So you're going to have to spray often. And that's a clay product, meaning that if you try and do it yourself, you're going to have problems with your spray equipment, because there's really not much for a homeowner that's going to be clay spray worthy as far as its oomph in the equipment. So you may have to get somebody in to spray that. But first and foremost, get yourself a care plan.
Yep, absolutely.
And Extension has some fantastic publications on fruit tree and spraying and diseases and insects. So I would take advantage of that. That's your tax dollars. Take advantage of it.
Nancy in St. Croix County will go to you next. Thank you for calling.
Well, hello. I have a soil question. I have a couple acres on a river, and I guess it would be silty soil. And over a couple decades, I've spent a lot of money on plants. And there's a lot that is successful, my maple trees and that kind of thing. But when it comes to flowers in the garden, what I've noticed is I will go out and buy a really mature, established plant. And I'll dig a deep hole that's twice the size, and I'll fill it in with soil and peat to contain the moisture. And then a couple years later, the plant isn't thriving anymore. And for the most part, many of the vegetation or plants in my yard that would flower will grow and not produce any flower heads. In the spring, the daffodils don't have flowers anymore. And so I kind of wonder, I'm putting all that nutritious amended stuff into the soil around the plant. But then in a couple years, I feel like everything's been leached out of that soil. How should I be approaching that?
I've got a couple of questions for you. Are there particular plants that don't do well for you, or is it across species?
I think it's across species.
Okay. And are you adding fertilizer to your soil before, during, or after planting?
So after a couple of years, basically what I do is because I want blooms, I throw a 10-10-10 slow release fertilizer on top, and that's it.
Okay. Number one, as we had talked about earlier, send a soil sample up to the soil lab and make sure that you put on there plants that you have there or that you intend to put in, so that they know what to look for as far as nutrition needs. But whenever I see across species that you've got foliage and no flowers, that tells me you may actually have too much nitrogen. And nitrogen is a vegetative boost. It's not for flowers. And along water, you may actually see a lot of nitrogen because you may have runoff in that water body that will get up into your soil, and it sucks up. Just because it's not running over the top of it does not mean that that substructure is not sucking water out of that waterway. So, you may have way too much nitrogen in there. And the only way you're going to determine that is through a soil sample. So go to the website, the Soil Labs website, and follow their instructions for submitting a soil sample. And they're usually pretty quick on their turnaround. They're usually like 6-8 weeks max, especially during their busy time. So I would do that. But again, cross species, when you're looking at that, then there is something going on in the soil that is affecting everything. I would not add peat to a planting hole unless I knew what the pH was of the soil, of the water, and then what that plant needs, because peat does have a pH moderating component to it. It's low pH, so you may actually be lowering it further than what it needs to be lowered.
Yeah, another good point. Nancy, good luck.
Good
Thank you.
luck, yeah.
Appreciate your
I'm
call.
hoping it's a really quick, simple fix that you get
Yeah.
a soil sample and they'll tell you what you need.
Rita in Green Bay, we'll go to you now. Hi, Rita.
Hello, hi. I have problems with grass in my yard. There are patches of mud or dirt. Just it's flat, but it's all over in different places in the yard, let's put it that way. Some of it's in full sun, some of it's in part shade. Some of those patches are next to arborvitae or pine trees. The rest of our grass has been treated for quackgrass, dandelions, and that looks very good. But these mud patches, they're just getting more and more.
Okay, question for you on some of what you've had done in the yard. So these mud patches, are they right next to the arborvitae, or are they just close to it and you can see the patches and then in the distance there's the arborvitae?
They're the arborvitae about 3 feet away from it.
Is there grass between that patch and the arborvitae?
Very minimal.
Very minimal, but you're seeing some growth. The reason why I ask that is shade can prevent some grasses from germinating and growing well. You'll see them be spotty, etc. Do you have a lawn service?
Yes.
You have somebody that comes and mows?
No.
Okay, you guys do your own mowing?
Yes.
Okay, reason why I'm asking you that is what I have noticed is, especially when we're in either droughty or wet times, if you're out there when the grass may be a little bit tender, and that can be under drought or under wet conditions, you can actually rip that grass out by the roots with the lawnmower wheels, depending on how you turn. I see it a lot in zero turn because, hey, we all love turning really fast on those zero turns because that's awesome. But what that does is that wheel digs into the turf. And you do that again and again and again, and you can get some bare spots. Other than that, I would ask, is this in complete shade? Is it sunny? And the reason for asking that is, again, different grasses react differently to different sun situations. So if you're looking at growing in shade or something that's a little bit wet, you may have to look at overseeding with something that's more appropriate for that site. Soil sample, again, we cannot hammer this home enough. Soil sample is a good idea. In this instance, you may also want to send a turf sample and see if the turf lab or whoever's doing turf work at this point can determine whether you've got a disease in there, because bare spots can be a result of some sort of pathogen that hits the grass also. And again, go to the website, follow the directions that the turf lab gives you. If they say wrap it in aluminum foil, wrap it in aluminum foil, whatever it would happen to be, and they can get a better answer for you than what I can give you over the airwaves.
Yeah. Rita, thank you for calling.
Yeah,
And
thanks.
Just a comment, too, on the lawns. During this hot weather, I know it's better usually it's better to mow high anyway, but you ought to be mowing 3-4 inches at least.
Easy. Yeah, 3-4.
In hot weather conditions that we're having.
Yeah, and remember, around here, most of our grasses are cool seasons. So when we get into hot, droughty period, you don't have to water. They'll turn brown, but they'll also turn green again. They're fine. They go into a period of dormancy based on the conditions and the temperature, and they'll come back out of it. Don't worry about it tremendously. If you're seeing spots or if you're seeing something else, send a sample in, or if you've got a lawn service, have them come and take a look at it, a quality lawn service.
Dave in Appleton will give you a chance. Hi, Dave.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. So I have a grassy, weedy area. It's got thistles and dandelions and quackgrass. It's about maybe 20 by 40. I want to kill that off and plant flowers in there, or prairie flowers. And I'm wondering, I've been told put down several layers of cardboard. Can you put down too much cardboard and then put wood chips on top? And I was also told you can use plastic, which I would like to do. And should I put plastic down first, then the cardboard, then the wood chips? And I've got time. I can leave it sit all this summer and even all next summer if I have to, but I want to kill everything off. Is that a good way to do it?
There are a number of different ways where you can kill those things off without going the Roundup or, the brush killer route. And oftentimes, if you want to solarize, that's putting the plastic down, you have to make sure that it doesn't tent up like a greenhouse, because otherwise the grass underneath will just grow tremendously well, and you pull it off and the weeds in the grass are bigger than when you started. We do have a bit of an issue in this part of the world with having enough heat to really solarize in a short period of time. So do expect that it will take you a long time to do that. And just weight it down here and there with some bricks or, stones or something like that, so that you don't allow that to just become a greenhouse. These hot days that are coming out, get your plastic out.
Yeah, this would be
kill
the
it off
perfect time.
Kill it off like crazy. I'm not sure I understand what they're recommending you do with the cardboard and the mulch, because that's not going to kill them off. What it's going to do is it's going to suppress them. And when you put the mulch on top of the cardboard, before that cardboard disintegrates, and yes, you can't put too much on it, it'll never go away. And I've used this method for creating my own beds, my own perennial beds also, which it works really quite well in the short term. And it will get you some space. But 20 by 40 feet with cardboard and mulch, that's a huge investment. Huge. Yeah. I would go the plastic route first. You could till it up if you wanted to and then put the plastic on. That's just going to loosen, the weeds that are there. If you don't want to do that, then because tilling will rejuvenate the weed seed bed underground. So, I'm not a fan of bringing up any more weed seeds than I have to. But if you cut everything off short, put your plastic down, I think you will be okay. You'll do okay. You're never going to get rid of all of those weeds, and the weed seed bed is going to be there forever. So expect that you will have to weed no matter if you get rid of all of them right now. You go to put those seeds in, you're disturbing the soil. That means you're bringing up weed seeds, etc. So expect you're going to have to do some weeding and or mowing as your prairie gets started. But it's a fun job.
It is.
It's awesome.
Indeed. Yeah. Good luck, Dave. Thank you very much.
I hope it goes well.
Yeah, me too. Steve in Evansville emailed us. He recently had some trees removed due to being in the power line right away, and he wants to replace them with shorter native plants to comply with the planting height limits. The plants can't be more than 15 feet tall, and he'd like native plants that provide for wildlife that can also block a nasty west and northwest wind in the winter. He can plant a combination of heights. It's full sun, clay soil. Plants, what wondering if you have some suggestions. He was looking at gray dogwood for the tall plants as it has a height of around 15 feet. He's okay with taller plants not providing as much with the taller plants not providing as much windbreak protection, but the shorter plants would need to be thick enough to provide a kind of snow fence effect.
Gotcha. To start with, Laura Joel has put together a great list of underwire plants. So I would hit extensions material to see what she has got, and she did that in conjunction with the power companies. So they worked hand in glove. So those will give you a good idea how you can stay under the wire, so to speak, with the power company. What to put in? Aronia is a fantastic plant. I don't know what your moisture situation is. If it's clay, may hold moisture fairly well, but Aronia is wonderful. Gray dogwood is good. I would... Let's see, native plant places, native shrub places. I would say go to Das Internet and look at Johnson Nursery, north side of Milwaukee. They are native plant growers, and they have got a phenomenal selection of native shrubs and small trees. I would look at bottlebrush buckeye. That's a nice, and we're talking Aesculus parviflora, which is the shrub type. And that's not going to get any taller than what you need, and it will colonize, but not invasively so. If you want something that is invasively cover, I would say false spirea. Yeah, and I'm going to have another moment where I don't remember the scientific name on that one. That one will colonize with fury. So it depends on what you're looking for. Hazelnuts will do well in that situation also. Colquitzia is not a native, but I have found that, and it's K-O-L, Colquitzia, K-W-I-T Colquitzia, T-Z-I-A. There we go. Colquitzia is not a native, but it does really well in a bunch of situations. I've not found it to be invasive at all, so you're good with that. Smaller type trees, even if you wanted to go to something a little bit more decorative, there is a great redbud called Merlot that only gets to be about 12 to 15 feet tall. And a redbud is one that you can kind of hack away at a little bit, and so if you do have to keep it under height, it's a little bit easier to do. And there's a good list to get you started.
Yeah, absolutely.
Evergreens that do well, there's junipers out there that will only get X high, so just go and take a look at the mature height on a lot of these.
Dave, thank you very much for calling. Appreciate your call. Lis Friemoth, our guest today, her business, The Garden Hoe. I'm Larry Mealer for Garden Talk on WPR News. You're listening to Garden Talk here on WPR News. We have a one-day member drive coming up this coming Thursday. A one-day drive works when we get an early start, so you can help us meet the goal of 1,200 donations by June 26th. And when you do, WPR programs will receive an extra $12,000 from a group of generous members. So join in now with your gift at WPR.org/donate. WPR.org/donate. And a gardening question for you. I hope you'll join in. Lis Friemoth with us from The Garden Hoe. It's great to have her back. You can phone in at 800-642-1234 or email to talk@WPR.org. A bunch of emails, should get to one or two here. Gina in Marquette County emailed. They have at least one oak tree that seems to be dripping some kind of sap or sticky liquid from the canopy. The canopy reaches over the patio, which is how she noticed it. She doesn't know if any other trees are doing this. She's thinking it may have a problem that needs some kind of treatment and wonders what you'd recommend. She keeps bees, so she prefers to use bee-friendly solutions. She can treat things on their property.
I without knowing what it is, no treatment recommendation. My question would be, if this is a big oak tree, do you really want to be climbing up in there to see what is going on? Because that's really what it's going to take to figure out what's causing the drippage. I cannot.
Is it aphids? Are aphids on it?
Aphids could be, and that's usually on new growth. That's when they're really the heaviest, and that's where you'll see some of that drip. And normally, when you see the black soot, then you know that it's generally aphids or some other piercing and sucking type insect that is causing that honeydew to drop. But aphids are the ones that I think I heard PJ talk about them recently. That they can't eat as much as they take in, so it just gets excreted. Otherwise, I would kind of think, anytime I hear something dripping from an oak tree, I think gypsy moth, but generally that's hard frass, so you would see things that look like peppercorns, small peppercorns all over the place. And that does have treatments. If it's aphids, I honestly, horticultural oil will take care of that. But again, homeowner often cannot get the equipment, the spray equipment, to get decent coverage to get it taken care of. Aphids you can actually knock off with a really heavy stream of water too, and that can oftentimes either redirect them or send them enough for a loop that they die. So those are a couple of things. I can't think of anything else for oak, and I don't. Back historically, I'm sure somebody has had a dripping oak from damage, but not like off the leaves or something like that, and not for an extended period of time because they're not the ooziest of trees.
They are not.
No.
Adam in Chippewa County will give you a chance to join in. Hi, Adam.
Yeah, hey, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I'm just driving around. I just felt compelled to call. I heard your host recommending false spirea as I think you even described it as a pretty invasive plant.
Oh, yes, very invasive, yeah.
Well, I recoil a little bit just because I'm in the forest management realm, and we've found some places where that has become very aggressive in pine plantations and natural wood settings in northern Chippewa County, and I think we're seeing problems elsewhere in the state. So I just wanted to tell people to proceed with caution, especially if they're in rural areas, to maybe look for other options and try to avoid things like that, or buckthorn or honeysuckle, which the ship is well sailed on. But just careful with that one.
Definitely. I do have to thank you for the comment, because we didn't add the proviso on the end of it. So thank you for that. And you do have to be really cautious with any plant, whether it's a shrub or a perennial or a ground cover. Anytime, let's go to the last one, ground cover. 2 words, ground cover put together. It's an invasive thug. That's why it covers the ground. And likewise, if you're looking for something that is going to cover a lot line, what have you, please do be cautious on what's on the other side, and you do have to maintain, whether that's going in and cutting out the aggressive growth. We do these things with caution, and thank you for the reminder to remind people to use with caution.
Janelle in Monroe, we go to you now. Hi, Janelle.
Hi, thank you for taking my call, Larry and Liz. It's always great to hear tips and tricks. About 3 years ago, we put in a pool in our backyard, in ground, and during the process, we got a lot of compacted soil with the trucks coming in and out, and then the piles of backfill and gravel. They laid some topsoil over as they left with the company. However, right now we're dealing with this severely compacted soil, and mainly weeds coming up in the area. It's such a big area, I just don't know how to take the next step to kind of rejuvenating the lawn back there.
How big of an area are we talking about?
The whole area, probably a full acre.
That is a huge job. Are you bound and determined that you're going to have grass this year?
No, No,
Okay.
and I'm very fine with having clover, and we have dandelion. I love seeing the bees and the butterflies. It
Okay.
doesn't have to be full grass either. So we're patient with it. We just know that it seems unhealthy right now.
Yeah, what I would suggest, yeah, and building sites are absolutely wicked, and you will find areas that either are so compacted or so disturbed that you may have some bare spots as you kind of start to develop that area. My suggestion would be for overall soil health, you do want some clay busters essentially, because I don't think you can add on that large of an area. You really can't add enough compost to make a difference without selling the house and buying compost, because that's about how much it would cost. But you can actually put in those plants, as you said, clover, that are going to add some nutrients back into the soil and actually allow that soil to heal itself. And it takes forever, but one step at a time, 1 foot in front of the other. And so I would look at a good mix of just cover crop. And this is going to sound kind of weird, but you might actually even want to talk to some of the agricultural people as to what they put in for pastures. That's beyond my area, but there's trefoil, there's clover mixes. I know that in many areas, and one of my kids does this too, they plant beets, and it's a specific type of beet that you can put into the lawn. And what that does is that beet actually it grows, and then it decomposes. You don't pull them out, but what it does is it expands the soil and it creates air pockets so that moisture can get in, and so that other things can start happening in that soil beyond compaction, and it helps to alleviate that compaction. So there are fantastic mixes out there that you can put in that will help you bust up the clay and get you some healthy soil back in that area.
There you go, Janelle. Thank you so much for calling. And Kathy in Marquette County, what's on your mind?
I had trees cut down, and I've got wood chips all over on one side. Can I just dig these wood chips into the ground and plant seed, or should I rake them off, get them out of there?
Well, how big of chunks of wood chips are we talking?
Inch, possibly 2 inches.
Yeah, what is going to happen if and honestly, you can do whatever you'd like, but I'll tell you what's going to happen when you do that. When you put that size of wood into the ground, it's going to sit there for a little bit. The nitrogen will start. What it does, fresh wood chips sucks nitrogen out of the soil around it. So you may have to add a little bit of nitrogen to the soil just to kind of accommodate that. Again, get a soil test done. But then that nitrogen, when it sucks that out of the soil, then it starts to decompose that fresh tissue. What may happen is you till that under, you think it's level, then as those wood chips start to decompose, it's going to sink. And we're not talking about 3 feet. We're just however many wood chips you put in, expect that that's going to decompose. Some of it stays in particle size and becomes soil over a bazillion years, and that's okay. And you can do that. There's nothing wrong with doing that, unless they were walnuts.
Yeah.
If they were walnuts, then I don't know that I would do that unless this is a site that had walnuts on it and you're not making a bad problem worse, because walnuts do have juglone, and that does create toxicity issues in the soil. And if you're used to that and you're accommodating it already, then no biggie. Otherwise, you can also take those wood chips, rake them up, compost them. And then you'd have decent compost also. That does take some time. So do you do it in the soil or do you do it in a pile? That's entirely up to you. Just accommodate, and have the soil tested periodically if you're going to put them into the soil, so that you know whether you need to add more nitrogen or not before you plant. And I would, if you're going to bury those things, you may have too many air pockets to actually get seed, to get good soil to seed contact, to get them to germinate. So you do want to be a bit careful about that.
Lis Friemoth, our guest today, and she will be with us for another half hour on the program. We're going to take a quick look at the news. We'll find out what else is in store for us, and then we will be back with Liz. I'm Larry Mealer. Thanks so much for joining us for Garden Talk. Larry Mealer here with my guest, gardening expert Lis Friemoth. She has a concierge horticultural service she provides through her business, The Garden Hoe. Happy to help you with your gardening questions, and I hope you join in. Give us a call. The number is 800-642-1234, or send an email to talk@wpr.org. And Liz, we have Richard from Madison online. Let's go there. Hi, Richard.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call. I have a black walnut tree, or had a black walnut tree in my backyard that was removed about a year ago. And I'm wondering if there is anything I can grow there at this point, like plant some tomatoes.
No.
Or if
Did you like that short answer? No.
no on any is Solanaceae. Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, no. But go ahead, continue.
Is there anything I can do to the soil?
No.
That will
Keep going. I'm having fun. Keep going.
How about raised beds?
Yes. Yes, you got a yes. Yay. Unfortunately, juglone stays in the soil for a horribly, horribly long time. And it not only came from the roots, but it also will wash off from the leaves and the branches and things like that were there. And but it will exude out of the roots. And roots on large hardwoods in general can extend for about 1.5 times the height of the tree. And so you're looking at a really, really large area. Now, the fact that that tree is gone, you do have the opportunity to do raised beds. Now, for a few years, you may actually see, if you put that raised bed right to the ground, you may actually see some residual issues from that juglone. But after a while, that will recede slightly, but not that much because it doesn't move. Champaign-Urbana had done some really great research work on juglone, and the guy was doing it for probably 20 years, and it never went out of the soil throughout that time. And he tested in a lot of different areas. So I know that there is a couple of schools of thought on that, but no, that's what the research says, is it stays in there. There are plants that do okay planted in the ground, whether there's walnuts there or not. And my email address is thegardenhoknows@gmail.com. If you email me, I'll send you a list of plants that I put together. And some of the things would surprise you. You can grow berries, you can grow all kinds of things. But the Solanaceae crops, no, they go belly up in a big hurry. And even, we've had serious issues with white pine, trying to grow white pine in a site that had black walnuts on it. And we had one client that wanted white pines come hell or high water, and we put them in, and many of them didn't even last a day, and we're talking like 15-foot trees. And they were gone. You could watch them shrivel up. So it depends on the intensity of the juglone in the soil, but I would exercise caution and do raised beds. And I don't know about you, but with each passing year, elevated raised beds makes more sense. So if you're going to put raised beds in, You may want to go the elevated route because you don't have the issue coming with the jug loam coming off of rainwater, et cetera, off the plant. So the only issue you might have with raised beds if it leaches upward, to start with. So if you elevate those beds, meaning you don't got to bend over, then you're also taking that introduction to your raised bed out of the picture. So I think you could be very successful with raised beds, just,
Sure.
a little caution. But email me and I'd be happy to send you the list I've got.
And tomato plants, I was thinking about the first time I grew some tomato plants in bales. At the end of the season, I was amazed at the length of the root system.
Amazing,
of
isn't it?
tomatoes. So, I mean, they are long. I mean, they went all the way through to the bottom of the bale.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you've got jug lawn,
It's an issue. It's a huge, huge issue. And oftentimes people think, well, I don't know what I'm doing. The tomato plants aren't growing. It must be me. And it might not be you at all, period. And, props to you for asking. Good job.
yeah, thank you so much for calling. Appreciate it.
And thanks for letting me be sassy.
We have an email with a photo from Paula in Whitewater. Her roses, a picture of her roses. This past winter, the roses did not fare well. She had dead bushes in spring, and she had 6 of them. And it's been suggested to her that she should concentrate on wood growth now, not blooming. The plants are so weak, some canes can't stand up. They're growing horizontally to the ground. Paula was recommended benign insect control. I don't know about that. What would you suggest?
Well, the picture, it looks as though there's rain on the leaves, which distorts what we can see slightly because I'm not sure what all the spots are. It's a little bit far away. But what I can see is it looks as though there may be a little bit of either leaf minor damage. Again, looking at a picture, it's difficult to tell. There may be a little bit of leaf minor damage intervein. If the leaves have 2 thin papery layers with nothing in between them, no green, it might be grayish, brownish kind of thing. That may be a critter that was in there and chewed the tissue up. I'm seeing some darker spots, but it almost looks, I can't tell whether it's insect damage or whether it's black spot. It's all interveinal. I'm not seeing margins that I would associate with a bacterial issue or a fungal issue, but that's more of a Brian. You want a real answer, you go to Brian for that one. But my question really comes in, are these grafted roses or are they own root roses? And if they're grafted roses, what we could have here is a situation that the graft portion, which is above ground, died off because, and we did see a lot of that this year. We saw an awful lot of death because we didn't have the snow cover in the southern part of the state. And actually
really
up north,
cold.
they didn't have it either. Yeah, really super cold, no cover, so there was no moderating the effects of that on roses. My suggestion is that if you can tell whether those branches are coming out from underneath that graft union, if it was a grafted rose, then just dig the whole thing out and start over, because what you're getting is rootstock growth, and that is not, if the growth that's coming out looks different than the growth you had in previous years, that tells me it's probably rootstock, and that's not what you want. It's not going to have a satisfying flower. It's not going to have satisfying habit. And we will see some really strange weather stuff coming up. If you're going to replace, I would suggest doing it with an own root rose. And what that means is that those roses, and we see it a lot in magnolia trees also, that if they do die back and they grow back, they will grow back true to what you purchase, because that rootstock is the same as the above ground stock. When you're talking about grafted plants, you're grafting desirable above ground traits onto undesirable traits, but good rootstock. That's why you use those. But that's why when you see those suckers coming up, you just get rid of them because they're not what you want. Kind of suspecting that's what this is. So if you focus on vegetative growth, you may not be happy with that because that's not going to be the rose you like. Fortunate thing is, if you want to let this play out over time, you'll see what the roses look like in relatively short order. You know, they're going to be blooming sometime soon. And so if they do bloom and it is the same rose, then yes, you focus on developing the vegetative structure. So that means doing some pruning, some training, and getting that plant back to where you had it before. Again, let's go back to if it's grafted and this is coming from the below the graft union, pull it out and go get a new one. It's a good reason to go shopping. And can I just say, I would not treat unless I know what I'm treating for.
Absolutely.
The shotgun approach to treating what your neighbor tells you it is not always the best use of your time, money, and talents.
Meredith called, couldn't stay with us, and she's calling about the earlier caller, Nancy, who wanted to plant some flowers, and part of your suggestion involved a soil test, but Meredith said she should also really pay attention, and you're going to agree with this, to the planting instructions for the specific flower she wants to grow. In addition to the soil test.
That's a wonderful comment, Meredith. Thank you. It's always a good reminder when our gardeners slap us upside the head. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. You're absolutely right. You know, if we're putting right plant in a wrong place, then it's not the right plant. And so you're kind of hamstringing yourself as far as success goes.
Greg emailed us, would white oak bark mulch be okay to use, thinking it would be a place for pests to live, or would just grass be better?
Without knowing the site, oak chips, we'll talk general terms. Oak chips are fine. Yes, the only thing you watch out for in wood chips are diseases and insects that you might be bringing in. If it's oak bark mulch, that generally has been treated and watched unless you're buying it from the neighbor's pile or something like that. And if there is some heat treatment involved in that, if you're concerned about any insects or diseases on any kind of mulch that you might be bringing in, you can heat treat that, and that just means solarize it, put it in a pile, and cover it with plastic. And you can get compost thermometers that anytime you're doing compost and or mulch kind of solarizing, etc., it looks like a long meat thermometer, instant read meat thermometer. And you want that temperature to get up to about 165, anywhere between 165 and 180 before you kind of take the plastic off. And you want to turn that a couple of times, and that will actually take care of most insect eggs and most disease issues that would be in there.
John wonders about your business. Could you talk about your business, the Garden Hoe?
I wonder about it sometimes too. My business is fun. I play with plants every day, and oftentimes I don't know what the next day is going to bring because my clients are mostly long-term clients, and their needs will vary based on what they're doing, what their lives are doing, what their landscapes are doing. And so I will go in to a client's place, and it may be anything. You know, I'm having trouble with my grass, or what kind of a perennial should I put in here? Or yesterday I had a wonderful afternoon planting containers for Honey and Sam on Lake Geneva, on the shore of Lake Geneva. Thank you for that little vacation. And so it really just kind of depends on what my clients need and what the day brings. My business started out, I was a county horticulturist for a number of years. And when funding, with like all places, funding kind of dries up, it was either you make money to give to the government agency to pay your salary, or you go earn it and you pay yourself. So that was my option. That's what I did. But I enjoy it. Every day is a treat. I'm all over the place. I've got clients in Florida. I was just down there a couple of months ago to redesign a landscape for a new house that she purchased in Florida. So it just kind of depends, and it's a lot of fun.
You get all over the country, but you're based right here.
Love Wisconsin.
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin is home. I was born and raised here. I love the people of Wisconsin. We are a cantankerous and humorous lot.
What are some of your favorite summer flowering perennials?
Oh, this year, let's talk about, it's kind of like your kids. If you have more than one kid, who's your favorite kid? Well, any given day, that could be any of them. And it's the same with flowering perennials. This year, I'm falling in love again with carnations, with hardy carnations, because they are proving to be a very diverse and fun lot. I'm also loving hellebores. Who could not love hellebores? It's a spring flowering plant, but the leaves during summer add to everything. And the flower heads are left. They're on there now. And so it adds some depth. Let's see, what else? What are others of my favorites? I love lilies. I love Asiatic lilies. They just bring so much fun and brightness to a spot. I love asters. I love zinnias. Annuals, perennials. It doesn't matter to me. I love color. Love color.
I was just thinking as you were talking, I was thinking about Japanese lilacs because I have one that sits right and the branches kind of come over the front porch. And right now, they're just now kind of dying off. But I've had some wonderful evenings and afternoons sitting on that front porch and the aroma of Japanese lilacs.
Have you noticed a time period during the day where the scent is more heavy?
Trying to think. I haven't thought about that.
As what I have found is there's a whole host of what I call my cocktail shrubs that
well, yeah. I'll let you mention it.
This is Wisconsin. That could be anything from 11 o'clock on. But there are an awful lot of plants that once you get past that really hot 3 o'clock time, they start to really let off their scent. And so you'll notice a difference going out there in the morning and smelling them as opposed to the afternoon. And so there are an awful lot of shrubs, flowering shrubs, that are way fragrant right around cocktail time. And so, one of the things the gentleman had asked about my business, one of the things I do when I get to know a client is, what are your habits? Because if they want some plants by the patio, and their afternoon beverage, whether that's iced tea or cocktail or what have you, and they like to sit outside, well, then you put the good smelly stuff next to where they're sitting. And so understanding people's habits, what they like, what makes them happy, that's a big part of what I do too. And the scented plants, to me, it's just absolutely fantastic. And my coffee trees finished blooming just this last week. And if you have never smelled the blossom of a coffee tree, you need to find one next year and go smell it. It has a scent that is almost reminiscent of the spice blends that you put in Thai food. So there's like lemongrass and, a nice green note and a floral note. And so for me, it's just so much fun to go out and smell and smell. One of my favorites that just finished, it's not a native, but it's a fantastic plant, is an abelia. And it's the only abelia that grows this far north. And I know Jungs carries it because somebody developed a cultivar on it, but it's Abelia mosaniensis. I think I got that right. And it is the most fragrant late spring flowering shrub you will have. It is intoxicating. It is wonderful.
Well, I had a little glass of wine with a friend on the porch last night, and the aromas were lovely, the lilac.
Multi-sensory. How can you beat that for gardening, right?
Patty in Madison has a question. Let's go back to the phones here. Patty, hi.
Hi there. Thank you for taking my call. I have problems growing cucumbers. I don't know if there's a fungus in my dirt or something. They always get yellow-brown spots, and they do not produce.
And what kind of a situation are you growing them in?
Well, I'm growing them. I tried raised bed gardening last year, but I put them back in the dirt, and I've been rotating them. So I don't know if it's because I get too much rain or...
Yeah, without seeing them, I'm going to kind of do I don't have a clue. But I know with cucumbers, if you're not paying attention, I mean, you can get beetles on them. And if they're not, are you seeing leaf damage or are the leaves just yellowing?
Sometimes they get spotty. Sometimes they get powdery.
Powdery
and
mildew.
sometimes there is leaf damage. And I do have a roll cover on it this year because I'm bound and determined to get some cucumbers.
I love your persistence. You go, girl. What kind of a cucumber are you growing?
Like the Oriental, the long one.
Okay.
The long, thin kind.
Okay, yeah, and cucumbers can be a little persnickety. When you're purchasing, whether it's seed or plants, go for something that is going to be resistant, and there are different cultivars out there that are going to be disease resistant. And if you have powdery surface on them, powdery mildew can really do a number on them really, really quickly. So my first suggestion is if you're growing the same kind of cucumber, go and get a cucumber plant of your standard non-Japanese kind and put them in a close together situation, not, right next to each other, but real close growing conditions so that you can see if it maybe might be the type for your area. That Japanese cucumber may not do well for you, but a regular cucumber might.
Yeah, there you go, Patty. Thank you.
And soil test.
Yeah. Colette in Eagle River. Hi.
Oh, hi. I've got a quick question for you. There's a new kind of invasive lily beetle. It's thin, long, and bright red. And I've been hand-picking it, but it's overwhelming my lilies. What do you suggest to kill it? I'm normally organic, but I want these dead.
All of us are organic until we get a serious problem. Larry's thinking. He had this on PJ, and I'm trying to think of what PJ said because I was listening. I was in the car that day.
I try to remember the name of the bug, and I can't think of the name of the bug. I'll tell you what. Here's what you should do, Colette. Send a note to the Insect Diagnostic Lab.
And maybe a picture.
If you can get a picture.
Mm-hmm.
And PJ Leash, the
He's
UW,
fantastic.
yeah, you get a really quick answer. Yep. The UW Insect Diagnostic Lab. Look that up, and it'll show you, give you really quick instructions. Send it off to him because maybe it's the lily leaf beetle.
It might be, and I'm not sure what type of lily or if it's. I mean, we're a little early for some of the other beetles, but I don't know. Yeah, PJ's the best one for that.
Yeah, and on that note, we are.
I'm gonna leave on a I don't know.
we're out of time. Liz, thanks so much. We'll look forward to your next visit.
My
Appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Thank you so much, Larry, and thanks to all your great listeners for tolerating me.
Lis Friemoth, she provides concierge horticultural services through her business, The Garden Hoe. Coming up, we're going to talk about a great new book about Japanese gardens, and that is next. I'm Larry Mealer for WPR News. Every part of a Japanese garden is intentional and symbolic. And up next, we talk about what we can find in these beautiful and tranquil gardens. Larry Mealer here for Garden Talk. Our guest is the author of this Lovely book. Japanese Gardens, Tranquility, Simplicity, Harmony. She is Gita Mehta, an adjunct professor of architecture and urban design at Columbia University in New York. She lived in Japan for 23 years, has co authored 5 books on the country, and she has just an absolutely lovely book that we're going to talk about today and talk about Japanese gardens. And maybe you may be a fan of Japanese gardens or want to know some more about them. And I hope you'll join in. How do they make you feel when you visit? Love to hear from you. Give us a call. The number is 800 642 1234, 1 800 642 1234. Or you could send an email to talk@wpr.org. That's talk@wpr.org. Get up, Meta. Welcome. Thank you for taking time to be with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Want to put you on the spot. You start your book with a poem. Do you have it in front of you? Would you read that poem? I thought it was lovely. Would you read it to us?
Thank you. I'll be happy to read it. And I have to say before I start reading the poem that, this book gave me a chance to visit so many Japanese gardens. And because our photographer insisted they had to be before the crowds show up. So we were there very early in the morning when the dew was still on the leaves. And that experience was really spiritual for me. And that inspired the poem I wrote. So, yes, with your permission, I'm very happy to read the poem.
Please do.
All right. Okay. So, the poem is called Gentle Acts of Nature, Time, and Man. Between dream time and time, beyond time and thought, the fresh of the morning, a morning of the afternoon, a morning of the evening, a morning of life, a sparkling dewdrop, a garden of the soul, a garden in the soul, a garden. Gentle acts of nature, time, and me, woven in beauty, a soul nurtured, a hoe, a shear, a seed, held for now in my transparent hands, then simply let go. From me the past, to me the future, a garden.
Oh, that's a lovely poem. And thanks so much for writing it and for including it in your book. Maybe talk about I just love the book. The photography and your writing, the combination of the two are wonderful. But explain to our listeners what you have in your book.
So what we try to do is we try to capture the essence of Japanese gardens. And I want to give a shout out to my co-conspirators. That's Kimi Tada, who did tons of research, and the amazing photographer Noboru Murata. It was really a pilgrimage for me to visit all these gardens in different places in Japan and enjoy their beauty. And so that's how the book came out. And the book is actually divided into several portions. There are temple gardens, there are private gardens, and then there are public gardens. So we tried to sort of categorize them. Public gardens to make sure everyone can really have a chance to go see them. And you can also see temple gardens. But I have to say that the private gardens, are disappearing because in Japan, land is so very expensive, and to maintain these gardens is so hard. So some of the gardens are no longer there or no longer accessible to public. But anyway, there's tons in the book that you can actually go and see and enjoy.
Yeah, they're lovely. Do we have wonderful Japanese gardens in the United States?
Actually, we do. There are many Japanese gardens um, around the world, actually. There's a beautiful garden in Seattle. There's a beautiful garden in Princeton. So there are several um, around around the world, and even in Brooklyn Botanical Garden, there's a portion that is inspired by Japanese gardens. So Yeah, the essence of them actually is so portable. You can carry it anywhere.
What's how do Japanese gardens differ from other styles of gardens? I think they're different from Chinese gardens, for example, but I think they take some inspiration, I think, as you point out in your book, from them. But talk about that.
Let me first compare to Western gardens. So in Western gardens, you're trying to tame nature. You're trying to control it. Whereas in Japanese garden, it's totally the opposite point of view that you are learning from nature, you are in awe of nature, and you're trying to very gently mold it to become, I want to say, to mold nature to become more natural, not to make it geometric or not try to, um, over design. Yeah, it's a very gentle way of thinking about it. And you have to remember that the essence of Japanese gardens actually in history comes from temple gardens or shrine gardens. So there's like a spiritual aspect to it, which you don't see in Western architecture. Comparing to Chinese architecture, um, a lot of influences for Japanese architecture and gardens, they actually came with Buddhism from India, then through China, and then coming to Korea and Japan. So then the really big deal was that, these influences merged with the local essence or local design sense. And in China and India, there is an effort to show the exuberance. So lots, plenty of things. Whereas in Japanese garden, it's about minimalism. It's about elimination of the inessential. I want to say that's the really big difference.
It is, it is, and you see it quite well, I think, in your descriptions, but also in the photos. There's like, and if I'm recalling from your writings, there's two types of Japanese gardens in a way. There's some are to view, and others are to walk in.
Yes,
I-
yes,
Is that correct? Yeah, go ahead, talk
yeah,
about that.
yes. So the stroll gardens usually um, are larger, obviously, so you can stroll through them. But even then, they may be quite tiny and they're designed in a manner that you are going round and round in the garden. But the way the garden's designed, every time you're seeing different things. So it feels much bigger than it is. So that's the stroll gardens. And then the viewing gardens are something that you don't really step into. And I'm thinking about rock gardens, dry rock gardens, particularly of Ryoanji, uh, so then you see that you are supposed to, enjoy them like you would enjoy a painting. You would enjoy, you don't have to step into it. So they are more visual. And you have to remember that, Japan is a very condensed country. The spaces are not so large. So these viewing gardens can sometimes be, as big as some people's living room. But then you can pour the whole essence of that aesthetic into that small space.
I was reminded of another note in your writings that gardens typically here are built in the United States are built kind of around buildings, uh, and in Japan it's kind of the other way around. That you talk about like little tea areas or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. So actually, in Heian period in Japan, the saying was that when you have a site, you first design the garden, and in the leftover space, you would design the house, right? And then the house would be designed in a manner so as to frame the views of the garden. So it's the garden that's controlling the whole thing. Instead of the house, you build the house in the squat center of the plot, and then the garden is around it. So it's just really the importance you give to the garden. Yeah, that's such a huge difference, right? It's a way of thinking.
It is indeed. Gita Mehta, our guest today, she's an adjunct professor of architecture and urban design at Columbia University in New York. She's also the author of the book we're spending a little time talking about today. Its title, lovely book. It's titled Japanese Gardens: Tranquility, Simplicity, and Harmony. And I hope you'll join in with your own questions and comments as we move along today. See, we have some emails now. You can join in. The number is 800 642 1234, or you could email us to talk@wpr.org. I'm Larry Mealer for WPR News. Thanks for joining in today for Garden Talk. Larry Mealer here. Just a quick mention, we have a one-day member drive coming up on Thursday, and you don't have to wait for that drive. You can give right now and maybe ask for one of those gifts that we offer during the drive. We've got a WPR Badger tote and a Badger koozie. You can get both of them if you want. Check them out now at wpr.org/donate as we visit with Gita Mehta, whose book is Japanese Gardens: Tranquility, Simplicity, Harmony. And again, join in 800 642 1234 or email to talk@wpr.org. Jeffrey sent us an email. He says there is a beautiful Japanese garden. It's called the Anderson Japanese Garden in Rockford, Illinois. And I'm just wondering if you're familiar with that particular garden.
I've heard about it, but I've not visited it, and I don't know very much about it, but it's wonderful to know. Have you enjoyed that?
That's well, Jeffrey sent us an email, and I have not seen it myself, and he was just writing to. I apparently inspired him, the Japanese garden in Rockford. What tell us?
Nice.
Yeah, let's talk about the different elements that you're going to find in a Japanese garden and their symbols. You talked a little about this, but let's go into a little more detail on that.
Mhm, mhm. So think about two types of Japanese gardens. There could be dry rock gardens, right? So which are completely dry, and you have these rocks usually raked by priests in some formation and beautiful to look at. So they are the viewing gardens. But in a stroll garden or a other garden, you would see that the elements are again subdued. There's of course water. They could be running water, or they could be dry stones pretending that that's a stream. So, invoking water, there could be waterfalls. You would have stones. And stones are very dear to the Japanese heart. And in a Japanese garden, they try to make the stones look as natural as possible. So, usually, three-fourths of the stone is under the ground. And what you're seeing is just the top of it, just like you would see in nature. So then, like in Chinese garden, these rocks are put like a tall rock next to a flat rock, like a stork and a turtle. But in Japanese garden, it's not that kind of symbolism. It's just simply aesthetics. You would see moss. Moss is, there's so many types of moss that Japanese gardens try to cultivate, and moss takes a long time and it has to be a particular kind of environment. So moss is a very prized item. Colors, yes, you would see colors in Japanese gardens, but you wouldn't see like 10 different types of flowers all at once. You would they kind of plan it so that in every season there's one amazing, like it could be cherry blossoms or it could be autumn leaves, but it's very edited, you may say, so that you're not overpowered by just many different colors, so they are very subdued. um, there would be elements that invoke time. So you may see very old trees that are being supported by supports just to keep them standing. But then, showing the impermanence of life and simplicity and the nature. So that is a very important part of Japanese gardens. So that makes a whole lot of difference to how you would view Western garden.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris in Madison has something for us. Let's go there. Chris, hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for this wonderful program. I was blessed to join my cousin in a hike around Shikoku for 3 weeks while the cherry blossoms were in bloom. And on Shikoku, there is a pilgrimage of 88 temples. My cousin did all 88, but I only did 3 weeks. And it's exactly as the professor is saying. It's so beautiful, so moving. It is I could feel in my body the weaving of spirit and nature. And it was so profound. And staying in people's homes, what are called ryokans, where they rent out a room, I also saw the beautiful simplicity of their home. And there was one for the 60th temple called Base 60. And the
Oh, oh, darn, we lost her. Oh, Chris, you have some wonderful comments there. I'm sorry we lost you. Comments, Gina?
Oh, I'm so glad that Chris got to see that because you can put everything you want in a book, but it's nothing like actually being in the garden, Japanese garden, and experiencing it. So I'm so glad, Chris, that you had a chance to see that and then share with us the beauty of those cherry blossoms you saw on the pilgrimage.
Yeah.
Yes.
Could you describe a little more what she was talking about? 'Cause it sounds like a very large area.
So Japan is actually four big islands and then lots of tiny ones. So Shikoku is one island of Japan. So the big island is called Honshu. That's where Tokyo and Kyoto and all are. And then Shikoku is a smaller island and it has pilgrimage because as you may know that in Edo period people were not allowed to travel from one city to another unless it was on pilgrimage. So pilgrimages became very, very popular and temples on the pilgrimage thrived. And often they have temple gardens and so on. So it's very popular in Chicago to do that 88 temple pilgrimage. You wear a white coat, and at every temple they stamp on your coat, so you have a evidence that you were there. And that goes back to Edo period because government wanted evidence that you're actually doing a pilgrimage. You're not just escaping the Edo government. So yeah, so that's about the pilgrimage. And yes, I can so imagine that Chris had a spiritual experience.
Yeah, I would bet. And she may be back. I'm not sure. We might have gotten her back. No, I guess not. I thought we had her back, but we were trying to get her back, but apparently we lost her. Well, uh, I'm glad she called because that brought up a wonderful thing. That does, I the photos, the raking that goes on in the sands. Is that sand raked every day in the temple gardens? Or
That's and those are actually very small pebbles, and they're not round. They're like angular, so that when you rake them, they stay in place. So yeah, so very tiny pebbles. And the monks in the morning, it's their routine. It's their part of their prayer. And these are junior monks. So they would get up in the morning, and then there's a special kind of rake with nails in it, sort of. And then they would, to get the line completely straight and with the same level of weight on the rake, it's not easy to do. I wish I could show you my dining table garden because I made a dining table with the raked sand and then I put a glass on top. So yeah, it's so fun to do that. Yeah.
oh, that's lovely. So Noah in Cornucopia, Wisconsin, emailed us and wonders how do Japanese gardens compare to American gardens with regard to agricultural production? Are aesthetics always a priority, or is permaculture or other means of food production relevant at all to the Japanese garden?
Uh, yeah. I want to say that that's not the goal. The production is not the goal. There may be some fruit trees, but they probably are there for the flowers rather than the actual fruit. And one thing I want to mention is that, during Meiji Restoration way back when, and then after the war, when the food was so scarce, they actually turned a lot of Japanese gardens into agriculture gardens and they were growing things. But then a lot of them have been reverted back to their original state, which was for pleasure and for strolling, but not necessarily for agriculture.
Yeah. There's an iris garden, is there not, in Kakigawa? It,
Yes, yes, yes.
tell me about that.
So, okay, one wonderful thing, if you see in the pictures in the book, is that it has big mountains in the back, and then there's this huge field of different kind of irises, right? And they look so natural, like yes, they could just be blooming in this valley, but actually they're very, very carefully manicured and monitored. And the interesting thing in that garden is that the mountain in the background is part of the garden design, you know? So in Japanese, it's called shake. It is borrowed scenery. So you look around your garden, and if there are trees that your neighbor has, or if there's a mountain, you take that into account in your design. So that's a very interesting concept. And if your neighbor has something you don't want to see, you may build a wall just till that level. You know, so you edit out what you don't want, and then you bring in what you want. So this iris garden, I think when you look at the pictures, you'll think it's really huge. Actually, it's not. But it's that because the mountain is part of the design. Shake is called in Japanese,
Uh,
borrowed scenery.
and Joan wants to know, what is a tea garden?
Ah, very good question. Because, in Japan, the art of drinking tea or tea ceremony, it's a very, very highly developed Zen sort of practice, right? People spend like maybe decades learning how to do tea ceremony correctly. And then to learn tea ceremony, you have to learn architecture, you have to learn garden design, you have to learn calligraphy, you have to learn pottery and flower arrangements, right? Then it's called the world of tea. So in this world of tea, the tea garden is actually, and there's probably a tea hut, and the tea garden leads to that hut. And this, you can think about this whole thing as theater, in the sense that when you go to this tea garden, there will probably be a gate. So when you enter it, you're in the tea garden. But your host, who's going to serve you tea, will not be in sight. The host is hiding behind because he wants you to first just take in the garden and enjoy it, right? There might even be a bench or something for you to sit at. And this whole time, the host is not around. It's you, because they want you to compose your mind and just really relax and leave behind any tension or swords or other things. And then so when the guest is ready and composed, then the guest gets up, and then there's a stone path which has probably been watered, because stones look best when they are watered. So then you'd walk along the roji or the stone path towards the tea hut, and then your host will appear and welcome you you know so this tea garden is a very elegant, very lovely, um, thoughtful kind of experience to help you compose your mind for the act of tea ceremony. And as you know, in Japanese tea ceremony, you don't talk,
Right.
right? Very intimate, it's very close, it's like music, music in action. So yeah, that's a Japanese tea garden.
Well, I wish we had more time to talk because I have many more questions, Gita. But I want to thank you so much for being with us today and for your book. It is a lovely book, and I hope a lot of people get to see the photos and to read your writing, which accompanies those photos so well. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me, and thank you to your listeners.
Geeta Mehta is an adjunct professor of architecture and urban design at Columbia University in New York, and her book is titled Japanese Gardens: Tranquility, Simplicity, Harmony. It's a wonderful book, and great to have her with us. And thank you for being with us. Thanks for joining us today. This and all of our shows are a team effort. Our producers, Clara Neipert, Joel Patnod, our technical directors, Lee Rayburn and Jeff Robbins, with us today. And our executive producer is Jill Nadeau. I'm Larry Mealer, and again, thank you for listening, and please stay with us. Lots more in store here on WPR News.